To begin your surgical cap, wash and dry your fabric in the hottest wash and the hottest dryer. After you've cut a piece to size, iron the piece in half with the selvage edges matching. Next, print out your instructions in your pattern and make sure that the inch is truly a square inch. Cut out your pattern pieces. After you have all of the pieces cut out, you'll lay the pattern onto the fabric. Begin by putting B on the fold, at the fold line, and you may either pin mark this, put pattern weights down, however you would like to mark this out. Be sure that the cap or pattern piece C is on grain, and then draw on your lines to cut. The width of the bolt of your fabric will determine the positioning of your pieces. Just be sure that you are cutting 2 of C, 2 of A, and 1 on the fold of B. If you are able to add an extra 1/2 inch or so, or even 1/4 inch onto your C, you may do that so that you don't have it right on the selvage. If you do have your piece C right on the selvage, that's okay. I'll show you how to adjust this. Next, you're going to cut out all of your pattern pieces. Make sure that you're cutting to the inside of the line for accurate measurements. When cutting the pattern piece that goes on top, be sure to mark the notch with a marking tool. After you've marked that, you're going to clip a very tiny 1/8 of an inch mark for the notch on piece C, and as well as the center front of the piece that you cut on the fold, or you may choose to mark this with a marking tool of your choice. After your pieces have been cut and notched, you will fold the 2 small rectangles in half lengthwise, and you can finger press or use an iron to press these in half. Next, you're going to press the bottom band up 1/4 inch and then 3/4 inch. I like to start in the middle and put this up 1/4 inch and then press out, and then I flip it over so that I don't get a fold line when I press on the other side. After you've done the 1/4 inch fold, you can choose how you would like to measure, mark, and press up 3/4 inch. These 2 folds are how we're going to finish the hem of the cap. After you've completed pressing these, you're going to move on to your machine. Be sure that you've got a new sharp needle and that your machine is properly threaded. Now you have a couple of options of how you are going to turn the tube after you've sewn it. I really like this method of taking a piece of ribbon, cutting it to a little bit longer of the length of the tie, and then I'm going to stitch right over that. Begin with a back stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance, go over the ribbon, and then once you get to the corner, if you do this trick of instead of sewing at a perfect 90-degree angle, if you do 1 stitch at an angle so that it creates sort of a triangle, and then continue on with your stitching, it's going to make it so that your tube and your turn are going to be pointed. After you've sewn 1/4 inch on one short edge and the long edge with the raw edges, you will clip your corners and all of your threads, as well as the small part of the ribbon. Now, if you take the bottom end of the ribbon, you can pull and turn your tube in one fell swoop very easily. This is just one of many ways that you can turn the tube. You may turn the tube of your ties however you would like. Next, you're going to set up your machine to finish the edge by top stitching the 2 turns that you did on the band. I like to use an edge foot and then move my needle position all the way over to the right. This makes it so there's equal distance from the internal turn to the stitch line, as well as the folded edge up against the measuring plate on the machine. After you've clipped your threads, you can set this aside. Next, you will press your ties flat, making sure that there aren't any bubbles and that the press is even. Now we're going to attach the ties to the band with a French seam, with the wrong side together and the bottom stitch line of the tie matching up with the bottom turn line. You are going to begin with a 1/8 inch seam allowance to stitch 1/8 inch of the tie and the band. Next, you're going to turn this so that you can stitch with 1/4 inch of seam allowance, beginning and ending with the back stitch. Make sure that your first stitch is at 1/8 of an inch and the second is 1/4 so that you can completely encase the raw edge. Complete this with both of the ties. After you've completed the ties and clipped all of the loose threads, we're now going to attach the top of the cap with the band. With the notches that you clipped or mark, you're going to sandwich them in between the two tops. This pattern was designed so that you don't need a use of the serger so that all of your raw edges are encased. After you've pinned the center front at the top, where the clips are, you are going to turn the round piece of the cap where that edge is, or the selvage edge of your fabric, under 1/4 of an inch on both sides, and then slowly working and stretching the fabric as needed, you're going to pin all the way around the cap. After you've completed pinning, you're going to begin at one of the turned edges at the bottom with a backstitch and 1/4 of an inch of seam allowance. I like to use my fingers at the point right before I sew to make sure that there aren't any tucks. If you do encounter any tucks, simply use your fingers to spread the fabric out and away, and also you can stretch out the fabric a little bit because it is cut on the curve so that you don't get any of those tucks. After you complete the stitch all the way around with a backstitch and clip your threads, you can turn your cap right side out. You'll notice that the edges are completely finished except for the opening. This is a method called bagging out. Next, after you have all of the edges taken out, we are going to insert the elastic. Cut one piece of 3 inches of elastic. The width of the elastic doesn't really matter. I'm using 3/4 of an inch here, but you can use something that's smaller, although I wouldn't use something that's much larger. Going up about 1/4 of an inch from that turned edge, you are going to pin the edge of the elastic flush with the seam. So just butt up the elastic with the seam and complete this on both sides. Next, you are going to stitch both of the ends of the elastic so that they are attached to the hat. After you've done that, you are going to go around the edge of the cap, making sure that you have that raw edge tucked under 1/4 of an inch and that you are not stitching on the elastic. This will close the raw edge that you have for the opening to turn this out, and it will also make it so that you can go around the top edge of the elastic so that it doesn't float around and is secured tight. After you've secured both ends of the elastic and you've sewn the tunnel on the bottom edge and the top edge of the elastic tunnel, you're almost done with the project. If you'd like to add finishing touches by attaching buttons to the side of the cap, you may do so that a mask can be attached to the cap rather than behind the ears. Clip your threads, wash your cap, and donate your surgical cap to those in need. I hope this video helps you.